In the beating heart of southern Nigeria, between the bustling city of Akwana and the quiet village of Eziokwu, the road stretched like a scar through the earth, long, hot, and alive with stories. Along that road worked a young man named Tund Okari, a poor mechanic with oil-stained hands and dreams far too large for the small garage he owned. His workshop sat beside a dusty palm grove, where he fixed broken taxis and battered motorcycles under a patchwork roof of rusted zinc sheets. Tund was not born into wealth or privilege. His father, once a skilled carpenter, had passed away when Tund was only 12, leaving him and his mother to survive on faith and determination. Life in Eziokwu taught him two truths: a man's worth is not in his clothes, but in his character, and dreams without effort are like clouds without rain. Every day, he rose before dawn, washed his face with cool stream water, and walked to his garage with nothing but hope in his chest. The city of Akwana loomed nearby, full of glittering cars and towering buildings, a world so close he could smell its perfume, yet so far he could never touch it. The rich came there to buy, eat, and show off, while men like Tund kept their world running quietly from below. Still, he admired them from a distance. He often told himself that if he could fix the car of a rich man once, maybe fate would finally notice him. That morning, the air carried the sound of distant music and laughter. A festival was taking place in the city, celebrating Akwana's founding anniversary. Every road was alive with traffic, and Tund's little workshop buzzed with customers desperate to get their engines ready. Sweat ran down his temple as he bent over an old pickup truck, his muscles aching, his mind lost in thought. He imagined someday owning a real garage, a place with tools that worked, walls that didn't leak, and customers who respected his skill. Then, fate came roaring toward him on 4 wheels. A silver Lexus SUV, its tires screaming, raced down the highway and lost control near the curve. Dust erupted like a storm. People shouted and ran as the vehicle flipped onto its side, sliding to a stop just a few meters from Tund's workshop. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Then Tund dropped his wrench and sprinted toward the wreck. Inside the shattered car was a young woman, half-conscious, blood trickling from her forehead. Her hair shimmered like black silk, her clothes screamed money, designer fabric, golden wristwatch, perfect nails. Tund's heart raced, but his instincts took over. He tore off his shirt, wrapped it around her bleeding arm, and forced the jammed door open with his bare hands. The metal sliced his palms, but he didn't stop. He pulled her free just before the fuel began to leak. People gathered, whispering in shock. The poor mechanic had just saved the life of someone far above his world. An ambulance arrived minutes later, and as they carried her away, the girl's eyes fluttered open for a brief moment. Her gaze met Tund's, confused, frightened, yet full of gratitude. She tried to speak, but only managed a whisper before her eyes closed again. That image stayed with him long after the sirens faded, the silent thank you in her eyes. The next day, news spread through both the city and the village. The victim was Zuri Mbeki, daughter of Chief Emeka Mbeki, one of Akwana's wealthiest businessmen. The radio announcer praised an unknown roadside mechanic for his bravery. Tund listened quietly, sitting on an old tire outside his garage, his hands still bandaged. For the first time in his life, people from the city mentioned his name. By noon, a black Range Rover pulled up in front of his workshop. From it stepped 2 men in dark suits. They asked for Tund and handed him a card embossed with gold letters: Mbeki Estates, Private Office, Akwana. They said the chief wanted to see him. Tund's heart pounded. He had never been invited to a millionaire's home before. His mother warned him to stay humble but prayed with tears in her eyes, saying, "Sometimes, the door to destiny opens without knocking." The next morning, Tund dressed in his cleanest shirt and borrowed trousers from a friend. He traveled to the city on a rattling bus, the skyscrapers growing taller as he approached. When he arrived at Mbeki Estates, he was stunned: glass towers, manicured gardens, and fountains that sang louder than the birds. Guards opened the gate for him, eyeing his cheap shoes but saying nothing. Inside the grand living room, Chief Emeka stood beside his daughter, Zuri, who now had a bandage on her head but looked radiant nonetheless. Her eyes lit up when she saw him. "You saved my life," she said softly, extending her hand. Tund bowed slightly. "Anyone would have done the same, ma'am." But deep down, he knew not everyone would have risked their life that way. The chief thanked him warmly, offering a thick envelope filled with money. Tund hesitated but accepted after polite insistence. He returned home that evening with his head spinning, not from greed, but from disbelief. Life, it seemed, had noticed him at last. Days turned into weeks. The Mbekis didn't forget him. Zuri occasionally sent a driver to bring her car to his garage for maintenance, though Tund suspected it didn't really need fixing. She always found a reason to stop by, asking questions about his work, his dreams, his village life. To Tund, she was like sunlight, bright, untouchable, but dangerously close. People began to talk. They said the rich girl was spending too much time around a poor mechanic. Some laughed, some warned him to keep his distance. But fate, once awakened, doesn't return to sleep easily. One afternoon, as the sun bled orange across the sky, Zuri came again, alone this time. She sat quietly as Tund worked, her eyes distant. When he asked if everything was fine, she smiled faintly and said, "You wouldn't understand. My world is not as perfect as it looks." That night, Tund couldn't sleep. Her words echoed through his mind. Maybe she wasn't the untouchable goddess he thought she was. Maybe the rich also carried invisible chains. The next day, a black Mercedes stopped by his garage. A man stepped out, wearing an expensive suit and a dangerous smile. He introduced himself as Ikechukwu, Zuri's fiancé. His tone was cold, every word dipped in arrogance. He warned Tund to stay away from her. "She's not your type," he said before leaving, his eyes sharp like a blade. Tund stood frozen long after the car disappeared. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from something new, anger, pride, maybe heartbreak. He didn't know yet. But he did know this: whatever bound him and Zuri was bigger than class or money. The next morning, he received an envelope under his workshop door. No sender's name. Inside was a single note written in elegant handwriting. "Meet me by the Riverside Road at sunset. There's something you need to know." The handwriting belonged to Zuri. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of fire, Tund walked toward the river, the same road where fate had first brought them together. He didn't know that what waited for him there would shake not just his world, but the entire city of Aquana. The riverside air was thick with the scent of wet earth and blooming hibiscus. Tund approached cautiously, his hands clenched, heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The water shimmered like molten gold in the dying sun, reflecting both the sky and the weight of the moment he was about to face. There, leaning against a twisted palm, stood Zuri Mbeki, her dress fluttering in the evening breeze, eyes hidden behind the shadow of her wide-brimmed hat. The sight of her made the world feel simultaneously infinite and fragile. "Tund," she began, her voice trembling slightly but filled with a quiet authority, "there is something you must understand before anything else happens. My life, it is not what it seems." She gestured toward the city skyline in the distance, where Aquana's lights blinked like stars fallen to earth. "My father's wealth, our family, it is a gilded cage. I've been trapped in it my whole life." Tund listened, the sounds of the river mixing with the faint hum of the city. He had always imagined the world of the wealthy as perfect, untouchable, and safe. But Zuri's words, full of vulnerability and pain, tore at that illusion. There was courage in her confession, a rare honesty that matched his own hard-won truths in the village of Eziokwu. He nodded silently, allowing her to continue without interruption, sensing that patience now was as important as action had been the day he saved her life. "My father," Zuri said, "expects me to marry someone he chooses, a man of influence, power, and wealth. Ikechukwu. He has everything, and yet I feel nothing for him. I cannot live a life that is not mine." Her eyes glimmered, a mixture of defiance and desperation. "When you saved me, you gave me something I had never experienced. Freedom. Safety without expectation. I don't know why, but I trust you, Tund. And that terrifies me." Tund felt the weight of her words settle upon him. He had saved her life, but now he realized that the danger had shifted, from physical harm to emotional entanglement, from the chaotic wheels of fate to the delicate threads of trust. He said nothing, his mind racing with questions. Why her trust? Why now? And more importantly, what did this mean for him, a mechanic whose entire world had been measured in grease stains and repaired engines? Days passed, each one a blur of small tasks in his workshop and thoughts of Zuri. She continued to visit under the guise of needing vehicle maintenance, but the true purpose was always unspoken, floating like a fragile promise between them. The village of Eziakwur, too, began to feel different. The neighbors whispered when they saw him leave the garage for Akwana, or when a sleek car arrived under the sun-drenched skies. Some were skeptical, cautioning him that wealth could corrupt hearts, while others admired the bravery of a young man stepping beyond the confines of tradition and poverty. Yet Tund remained cautious. He had learned that life's rewards often came with hidden costs. Even as he polished engines and adjusted transmissions, he wrestled with a private question. Could a life of simplicity and honesty truly intersect with a world built on influence and opulence? Could his heart survive the glare of gold without melting under its heat? Meanwhile, in Akwana, the tension between Zuri and her father intensified. Chief Emeka Mbeki, a man whose presence seemed to stretch from one end of the city to the other, summoned advisors and lawyers to discuss arrangements for his daughter. Zuri's refusal to comply sparked whispers in the halls of power, unsettling the delicate balance of respect and authority he had built over decades. The Mbeki estate, with its fountains, polished floors, and imported artworks, became a battlefield where tradition clashed with personal freedom. And at the center of it all, Tund remained a silent variable, unknown to most, yet destined to shake the foundations of the city's carefully ordered life. One evening, as the sun sank low behind Akwana's tallest skyscraper, Tund received an unexpected visitor. A young woman from the village, Amara, arrived at his garage, breathless and anxious. She had been a close friend since childhood, her presence a reminder of his roots and the simplicity he could never forget. "Tund," she said, her voice urgent, "I heard about what's happening with Zuri. Be careful. Wealth changes people. Don't let it change you." Tund appreciated her warning, but he also knew he could not ignore what had begun to stir between him and Zuri. Her courage, honesty, and vulnerability were magnetic. And yet, every time he looked toward Akwana, every time he thought of the Mbeki estate and the power it represented, he felt the weight of reality pressing down. Wealth was not just money, it was influence, expectation, and chains hidden in silk and gold. Then came the first true test. Zuri revealed that her life had been endangered again, this time not by accident but by a hidden threat. An unknown adversary had sought to exploit her family's wealth, someone who had observed her moments of weakness and vulnerability. She needed Tund's skill, his courage, and his ingenuity once more. He did not hesitate. Together, they devised a plan to protect her, blending his knowledge of engines and mechanics with her insight into her father's networks. The city became their backdrop, a labyrinth of streets, traffic, and shadowed corners, where danger could be around every turn. Through these shared experiences, Tund began to see the complexity of Zuri's world. He saw her strength, but also her fears, her independence, but also her loneliness. And Zuri began to see him differently, not just as the mechanic who saved her life, but as someone who could stand beside her in moments of danger, someone whose integrity and resilience were as rare as the wealth that surrounded her. Ultra-realistic African village scene at dawn. Tund, a young poor mechanic, about 25, slim, wearing dusty brown overalls and a simple white t-shirt, hands stained with grease, running toward a broken car near a dusty village road. Zuri Mbeki, a wealthy girl, about 23, wearing a slightly torn pastel dress, hair braided and tied with a scarf, is trapped inside. Background: mud huts, palm trees, chickens roaming, villagers watching from a distance. Early morning golden light, dramatic tension, cinematic focus on expressions and movement, emotional suspense. The city of Akwana had never felt so alive and dangerous all at once. Its lights flickered like distant stars caught in a restless sky, and the hum of traffic sounded like a pulse that matched Tund's own racing heart. What had begun as a simple act of courage, the saving of Zuri Mbeki's life, had grown into a complex web of trust, ambition, and unseen forces that now threatened to consume everything in their path. It began with whispers. Rumors circulated in hushed tones among the city's elite. The poor mechanic had become entangled in the Mbeki family affairs. Skeptics and opportunists alike watched, waiting for a misstep. Tund, however, remained focused on one thing: protecting Zuri and standing by his principles. He did not yet know that the greatest challenge had nothing to do with danger from outsiders, but from secrets buried within the very walls of the Mbeki estate. Zuri's confidence had been shaken by her father's advisors, who warned her repeatedly to stay away from Tund. Yet her heart refused to yield to fear. One evening, she met Tund at Azu River, a secluded tributary winding between the city and the outskirts of the village of Ogbomosho. The river's current carried stories of old, murmuring like an ancient oracle in the moonlight. Zuri's voice trembled as she confessed something she had never told anyone before. My life, Tund. I have been under watch for years. Not just by my family, but by people who wish to control everything my father built. They see me as a tool, a bridge to their gain. Her eyes, dark and stormy, searched his face for understanding. You saved me once, but the danger is returning, and it's closer than we think. Before Tund could respond, the sound of engines approached. A convoy of black SUVs emerged from the shadows along the riverside road. Men in dark suits, their faces unreadable, stepped forward. Tund instinctively positioned himself between Zuri and the intruders. He had no weapons, only determination, grit, and the skill that had served him so well in the workshop. You shouldn't have come here, said one of the men, his voice flat, yet cutting like steel. The girl belongs to us now. Zuri's hand instinctively gripped Tund's arm. Her trust was absolute, but the fear in her eyes mirrored his own. Tund felt an unfamiliar surge of anger. The life he had known, the quiet days in his garage, the honest work, had prepared him for hardship, but not for this. Yet he also realized that hesitation now could cost everything. Using the riverbank as cover, Tund guided Zuri through the reeds, past shallow pools and twisted roots. They ran, not just for survival, but for the fragile thread of freedom Zuri had come to cherish. Every step tested his endurance, every glance at the pursuing men stoked a fire of desperation. And yet, amidst the chaos, a part of Tund felt alive in a way he had never known, a purpose that transcended tools and engines, a calling that intertwined with courage and loyalty. By the time they reached the edge of Ogbomosho, the city lights behind them seemed distant, almost unreal. They paused to catch their breath, hearts hammering. Zuri's hand clutched his as if afraid that letting go would mean losing not just him, but herself. You saved me once, she whispered, her voice trembling, and now you've saved me again. But Tund, there is something you must know. The man you saw as a simple fiancé, Ikechukwu, he is not the only danger. There are secrets in my family that could destroy this city if they are revealed. Tund listened, tension building. Secrets? He asked. She nodded. There are investments, partnerships, and corrupt dealings. People in the city have much to lose if the truth comes out. And they will stop at nothing to keep their power intact. My father is not entirely aware, and I can't face it alone. That is why I came to you. You have nothing to lose, but your courage is unmatched. You are the only person who can help me make things right. The weight of her words settled upon Tund like a storm cloud. He realized that his involvement had escalated far beyond a simple act of heroism. This was no longer just about a life saved. It was about confronting corruption, power, and deceit at a level he had never imagined. His mind raced, thinking of the village, his mother, and the quiet garage that had been his sanctuary. All of it seemed insignificant now in the face of a threat that spanned from the shadows of Akwana to the heart of the Mbeki Empire. They returned to a safe house Zuri had secretly arranged, a modest apartment in the heart of the city that overlooked the river but remained hidden from prying eyes. It was there, in that quiet and dimly lit space, that she revealed the full extent of the danger. Her father's business empire had become a battleground of deceit. Partners, once trusted, had conspired to embezzle funds, manipulate contracts, and even stage accidents to maintain control. And now, she said, some of those men had discovered her involvement with Tund. Tund felt a shiver run through him. His life, which had been defined by grease, metal, and hard work, now carried a weight that could shake the foundations of a city. And yet, he knew he could not turn back. Courage was a rare commodity in this world, and he had already spent a lifetime building it through struggle, toil, and quiet resilience. Over the following days, Tund and Zuri worked together, mapping out a plan to protect her, expose the corruption, and reclaim the integrity of the family's name. They enlisted a few trusted allies, people from both the village and the city, whose loyalty had been earned through hardship and shared experience. Each step was perilous, each decision a gamble. But through it all, Tund discovered something remarkable. Zuri's bravery matched his own. Where he had strength in action, she had strength in intellect and intuition. Together, they became a force neither of them could have imagined alone. But then came the twist that shook Tund to his core. A trusted aide, someone he had assumed was loyal, revealed himself as a traitor. Obinna, the the man responsible for coordinating security and information, had secretly aligned with Ikechukwu and the shadowy conspirators. The revelation was a knife in the back. It exposed Zuri and Tund to imminent danger, and it threatened to undo everything they had worked for. Late one night, Obinna attempted to ambush them. Tund, however, anticipated the move. Using his knowledge of mechanics, hidden passages in the city, and quick thinking, he managed to evade capture, protect Zuri, and expose Obinna's betrayal. But the ordeal left both of them shaken. Trust had been broken, and the true scale of the city's corruption became undeniable. For the first time, Tund realized the reality of the world Zuri inhabited. Saving her life once had been straightforward. Danger was visible and immediate. But navigating the labyrinth of greed, secrecy, and betrayal within a wealthy empire required strategy, wisdom, and a moral compass sharper than any blade. And yet, despite the fear, despite the stakes, a bond had formed between Tund and Zuri that could not be broken. They had faced danger together, and in doing so, discovered a connection that transcended class, wealth, and expectation. It was a bond built not on convenience or circumstance, but on courage, trust, and shared humanity. As dawn broke over Aquana, painting the skyscrapers with hues of gold and crimson, Tund and Zuri stood together on the balcony of their safe house, overlooking the city. The skyline, once distant and unattainable, now seemed part of their world, a world they would have to navigate carefully, boldly, and honestly. The next challenge awaited them. The city had secrets still to reveal, and the storm of betrayal, power, and wealth was far from over. But Tund knew one thing: courage, integrity, and loyalty could illuminate even the darkest path. And with Zuri by his side, he was ready to face whatever the city, or life itself, had in store. The city of Aquana simmered with tension. Its streets were alive with rumor, whispers of scandal, and the invisible web of power stretching from the glittering towers to the shadowed alleys. Tund walked beside Zuri, both of them acutely aware that every step could determine not just their fate, but the fate of countless lives entangled in the Mbeki Empire. The quiet river that had once offered solace now seemed a memory of innocence, replaced by a city pulsating with ambition, greed, and danger. Days of planning and subtle maneuvering had led them to this moment. Tund had become more than a mechanic. He had become a strategist, improvising with tools, knowledge of the city, and sheer instinct. Zuri, with her insight into her father's empire and the secrets of the elite, provided guidance and foresight that allowed them to anticipate moves before they were made. Together, they formed a partnership forged in urgency, trust, and courage. The night began quietly, but the air carried an ominous charge. Within the Mbeki estate, lights flickered as the scandal threatened to erupt. Documents had been recovered, implicating corrupt partners and revealing the breadth of the conspiracy. But the final piece of the puzzle was hidden: the identity of the mastermind orchestrating the chaos, someone who had been pulling strings behind every betrayal. Tund and Zuri had tracked leads, followed whispers, and observed patterns. And now, in the shadowed corridors of a seemingly abandoned warehouse near the outskirts of the city, they were poised to confront the truth. The warehouse, cloaked in darkness and silence, seemed a fitting stage for revelation, a place where power and deceit could no longer hide behind gold or influence. Inside, they found Ikechukwu, the fiancé, and a group of conspirators huddled around a table strewn with papers, contracts, and plans. The men had not expected Tund's resourcefulness. They had underestimated him. Using clever diversions, knowledge of the city's layout, and timing honed from years of precise mechanical work, Tund and Zuri approached unnoticed. Every step brought the weight of fear and anticipation, yet also an unspoken clarity. This was the moment where courage had to meet consequence. Ikechukwu's expression shifted when he finally noticed them. Surprise gave way to anger, then disbelief. He had considered Tund insignificant, a poor mechanic with no connections, no influence, no power. But here he stood, revealing secrets, exposing plots, and threatening the carefully constructed illusions of dominance. Zuri stepped forward, her presence commanding and unwavering. "It ends tonight," she said, her voice steady and resolute. What followed was a tense confrontation, not of fists or weapons, but of wit, evidence, and moral leverage. Tund presented the proof they had gathered: documents, recordings, and eyewitness accounts that demonstrated the conspiracy in full. Ikechukwu and his accomplices could no longer hide behind wealth or status. Every lie they had constructed unraveled under the weight of truth. Zuri's words cut through the room with precision. She revealed not just the financial manipulations, but the human cost, the suffering caused by greed, the lives disrupted, the betrayal of trust. The conspirators, once confident in their power, now faced the undeniable reality that they were exposed, vulnerable, and accountable. Tund watched, heart pounding, as the shift in the room became tangible. The arrogance of wealth, the illusion of invincibility, crumbled in the face of courage and honesty. And in that moment, he realized something profound. True power was not in money, influence, or manipulation, but in the unwavering commitment to what is right. As dawn approached, the confrontation ended not with violence, but with surrender. Ikechukwu and the conspirators were taken into custody, their plans foiled by the unlikely duo of a village mechanic and a millionaire's daughter. The city breathed a collective sigh of relief, unaware of the storm that had been quietly averted. In the aftermath, Zuri and Tund stood atop the Mbeki estate, overlooking the city. The first rays of sunlight painted Akwana in gold and crimson, casting long shadows that seemed to retreat in the face of new clarity. Zuri turned to Tund, her eyes reflecting gratitude, relief, and something deeper, a bond forged in shared risk, moral courage, and unwavering trust. "Tund," she said softly, "you saved more than my life. You saved truth, justice, and the integrity of this city. I don't know how to repay you, but I do know that whatever path we take next, we face it together." Tund felt the weight of her words. He had come from a small village, a life defined by hardship, toil, and the simplicity of honest work. Yet now, standing beside Zuri, he understood the magnitude of courage, the kind that does not seek reward but acts because it is necessary. He realized that the line between heroism and humanity is drawn not by circumstance, but by the choices one makes in the face of adversity. The city below had been shaken, yet it had survived. The Mbeki Empire, once threatened by deceit and corruption, now stood on a foundation strengthened by truth and integrity. And Tund, the mechanic from Eziakwu, had become more than a savior. He had become a symbol of resilience, honor, and moral courage. As they descended from the estate to walk through the quiet streets of Akwana, Tund reflected on the journey. The path from the village garage to the heart of the city had been perilous, filled with uncertainty, betrayal, and fear. Yet through it all, he had discovered something invaluable: that courage, loyalty, and integrity are forces more powerful than wealth, influence, or intimidation. And Zuri, who had once been trapped in a gilded cage, now stood free, guided by her own wisdom and fortified by the courage of a man who had nothing to lose but everything to give. Together they faced the future, not as mechanic and millionaire, not as savior and saved, but as equals, bound by respect, trust, and the shared knowledge that the most profound victories come not from power, but from moral courage. The city of Akwana, unaware of the quiet storm that had passed through its streets, began its day as usual. Vendors arranged their stalls, children ran along the riverbank, and life continued. But beneath the surface, the world had shifted. Two lives, once separated by circumstance and class, had intertwined, leaving an indelible mark not just on each other, but on the very fabric of the city. And Tund knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with the same unwavering resolve that had carried him from his small village to the heart of Akwana. The climax had passed, the truth revealed, and the city changed forever. Yet, as with all great stories, the end was not in sight. One final chapter remained, a conclusion that would honor the journey, reveal the ultimate lesson, and leave an unforgettable mark on the hearts of those who witnessed it. The city of Akwana awakened to a golden morning, its streets alive with routine yet subtly changed, as if the heartbeat of truth had quietly shifted the rhythm of the metropolis. Life flowed as usual, vendors calling out their wares, children chasing each other through puddles, taxis honking, but beneath the surface, a silent revolution had occurred. Power had been tested, corruption had been challenged, and a simple act of courage had rippled across the city in ways unseen yet profound. Tund walked beside Zuri through the quiet streets near the Azu River, the water sparkling in the early sun. The city still held its grandeur, the skyscrapers glinting with ambition, but Tund noticed something he had never observed before: the blend of city life and village resilience, the harmony of wealth and humility, the quiet balance that could exist when people acted with integrity. For the first time, he felt not like an outsider gazing in, but like someone who had shaped the world around him with nothing more than courage, intelligence, and an unyielding heart. Zuri, now freed from both the manipulation of her father's business partners and the expectations imposed upon her, walked with an ease she had never known. The golden bracelet on her wrist, once a symbol of privilege and confinement, now felt like an ornament of choice, a reflection of the life she had claimed for herself. She glanced at Tund, gratitude and admiration shining in her eyes, and spoke softly, not needing to explain the depth of her feelings. Together, they returned to Eziakwu, the village where Tund had grown up, to find the roots of his courage and the foundation of his character. The village had changed too, subtly yet unmistakably. Word of Tund's deeds had reached even the remotest corners. A mechanic had saved a millionaire's daughter, exposed corruption, and remained true to his values. Villagers now looked at him with reverence, a mix of pride and wonder. Children followed him along the dirt paths, eyes wide, hoping to touch a life that had reached beyond their humble horizon. As they walked through the familiar palm groves and dusty lanes, Tund reflected on the journey. From the first day the silver Lexus crashed near his workshop, to the dark nights by the river, to the perilous confrontations in the heart of Aquana, every moment had been a test of morality, courage, and endurance. And through it all, one lesson became clear. True power does not reside in wealth, influence, or the ability to dominate, but in the capacity to act rightly, even when the stakes are impossibly high. Zuri stopped near the old wooden bridge spanning a tributary, the sun casting a golden glow over the rippling water. She looked at Tund and smiled, a smile that carried relief, gratitude, and a hint of wonder. "You could have walked away at any time," she said softly. "But you didn't. You didn't because you are brave, honest, and kind. That is something money cannot buy, and power cannot command." Tund smiled in return, humbled but unshaken. "I did what anyone would do," he said quietly, though he knew the truth. He had risked his life, not for glory, not for wealth, but because it was the right thing to do. And in doing so, he had discovered that morality, courage, and loyalty are forces that shape worlds more profoundly than gold or titles ever could. The village gathered that evening in celebration, not for the wealth that had been spared, not for the scandal that had been avoided, but for the courage, justice, and integrity that had restored balance. Elders spoke of Tund's deeds, of Zuri's bravery, and of the bridge between village wisdom and city ambition that had emerged. The community realized that greatness is not measured in riches or status, but in the ability to act rightly, to protect the innocent, and to inspire others through integrity and courage. As the stars emerged above the village, mirrored in the calm waters of the river, Tund and Zuri stood side by side, reflecting on the journey that had brought them together. Their bond had been forged in adversity, strengthened by shared trials, and solidified by trust and understanding. They understood that life's trials would continue, but they had proven that even in a world dominated by power and corruption, honor and courage could prevail. Zuri finally spoke, her voice carrying the weight of realization and hope. "In the end," she said softly, "it is not the wealth we inherit, nor the influence we gain, that defines our lives. It is the courage we show, the honesty we embrace, and the kindness we extend. Those are the things that endure, long after the streets quiet and the buildings crumble." Tund looked at the river, the stars reflected in the water like tiny fragments of eternity. "Kindness may walk slowly," he said, his voice steady and calm, "but it always arrives. And courage, once awakened, can illuminate even the darkest path." The village slept under the gentle sway of palm trees, the city beyond resting in uneasy peace, yet the world had shifted imperceptibly. One act of bravery, one life saved, one choice made in the face of danger, had created ripples that spanned from humble village roads to the glittering heart of the city. Tund, the mechanic, had become a quiet hero. Zuri, the millionaire's daughter, had become a beacon of choice and independence. Together, they had reshaped the narrative of their lives, leaving behind a story that would inspire those who came after them. And as the first light of dawn bathed Eziakwu and Aquana in warmth, the moral of their journey became clear, a lesson as old as the rivers and as enduring as the mountains. In the end, the river that forgets its source will always run dry, and the heart that acts with courage and integrity will always find its way home. The wind carried that truth across fields and streets, whispering through the leaves, dancing over rooftops, and echoing in hearts willing to listen. Tund and Zuri knew that their journey had not ended. Life would always test them. But now, fortified by trust, morality, and the knowledge that courage can bridge worlds, they faced the future together, undaunted, united, and unshakable.